This is Valley's People, episode 1 for 1981. It's 30 seconds in duration. It's replay to be advised.
Hello and welcome again to The Valley's People. This is a new series of The Valley's People, and that's pretty exciting, I guess, because some 12 months ago when we started this program, there were quite a few people, not necessarily connected with the show, who said, where in the world are you going to get 50 people from the Hunter Valley to be of interest? Well, as you may have seen, we've had those 50 and we're now on hopefully to another 50. People who have in some way contributed to our lifestyle and the manner in which we now live in the Hunter Valley. And we have some very interesting guests, especially guest 1 today. I hope you can join us. Thanks for joining us today. The first guest in The Valley's People is someone who said no to leaving Lake Macquarie many years ago. In fact, if he hadn't said no to leaving Lake Macquarie, things may not have eventuated as they had. This man has done so much for people not only in the lake, people also in the Hunter Valley, people at sea. That work has been rewarded with plaques and appreciation from people such as the Deputy Commissioner of Police of New South Wales, the Lake Macquarie Shire Council, and of course there are many, many other awards that this man has won. He's life member of quite a few organisations. It's my pleasure to have as our first guest, Charlie Hollis, and welcome to The Valley's People, Charlie. The thing that intrigues me most about you is how in the world did you ever become the unofficial pilot to just about everything that happens across the Swansea Bar and the Swansea Channel, Lake Macquarie?
Well, Ron, it started when first come to Lake Macquarie when the yachts went to Newcastle to line up for the Queen and the Hunter River, line their yachts up, and I went along there and assisted them to get the boats out and then to get them back in again. And an old member of Lake Macquarie Yacht Club, an ex-Commodore, met me there and was surprised at how interested I was in doing what I did do, and he also wrote a nice letter of thanks for what I'd done and said Lake Macquarie Yacht Club was open to me from then on. And their presentation night, they invited me along and gave me a nice silver cup for the first season I'd been on Lake Macquarie. And from then on they asked me to assist them in taking the yachts in and out, and from one yacht it led to all yachts, and there's not many yachts come into out of Lake Macquarie that I don't have something to do with one way or another.
Not unless they want to go aground.
Well, even if they don't come aground, I have letters come from and phone calls from Sydney, being recommended. Some people, some yachty recommends another yachtsman that may be coming up to contact us. What I do is I ask them when they'll be arriving. If it's a week, I'll send a little chart down to them and tell them to phone us the night before they leave, and we talk and explain the chart and one thing and another, and they have no trouble in coming into Lake Macquarie. That's if there's enough water. If there's not enough water, well then we go and intercept them and we drag them over the shallows. And
Yeah, but it's
bring
not
them
only
over.
yachts, Charlie, though, is it? I mean, you've brought in all sorts of paraphernalia across the Swansea Bar and down the channel.
Well, yes, we're official pilot for Harbour Tug and Lighterage, for the Electricity Commission, for getting their equipment in. They said I haven't got to dive for the next 3 years because there's 3 lots of, or another 3 big tows to come in.
Oh, really?
And well, I've got to live until they get those in over the bar, they reckon.
That's about the only way they could bring that heavy machinery through, wasn't it, for the Lake Macquarie power stations, to bring them across the channel? And you brought them across the channel, in effect.
Well, that was the only way. They talked about bringing it across by big tractors, landing it on the ocean beaches and various things, but anyhow, we eventually proved to them it could be done up the channel and brought in the way we're doing it, and it's turned out a real success. Last year, a little bit of a problem. It took us about 12 hours instead of 5 because we had to come in on the high water instead of half tide. But still again, we completed the job in approximately 12 hours, which was quite a good effort.
Well, what's fascinated Charlie Hollis towards the Swansea Channel? I mean, why especially you to just about be the state's unofficial pilot?
Well, actually water is a trade to me, and people have all got their different trades. Water and oysters and fish, that type of thing, that's a sort of a born trade to me, and it's a sort of a system. Now, the water, well, it's one of those things, there's a lot to learn about it, and it takes years to learn, and if nobody points some of the things out to you, well, you'll never learn. I had a very hard father in one sense, but he learnt me everything he could and wasn't in a book about the water.
One of your old schoolmates told me that you actually rode to school from Anna Bay or somewhere there in Port Stephens?
We rode to school from Finnegan's Island to Anna Bay. We used to row to dances. I was a champion rower when I was 14, 15 and 16, but never trained to row. It was just one of those things that a pair of paddles to me is like a good spanner to a mechanic or something like that. I love rowing, and people look at me and think, you know, yes, there's no effort to him, but the thing is it's a trade, and that's the thing. Now, it's the same as Swansea Bar and Swansea Channel. I take a keen interest in it. People travel up and down the channel. They never look at the channel. They get in, they get out, but they never study it. And lots of people don't understand what to study. So I do, I've done I don't know how many trips down the channel with boating people of Newcastle district and around. I take them down and explain to them the do's and don'ts of the bar, and also the beacons and that type of thing. And that gives them a bit of grounding to know what to look for when they get to a bar. See, they don't understand what breakers are. They buy a boat and they go down, but they don't know what a bar is. Now, we talk about when you're going over a bar, you watch for the seas. You've got to, and then you'll find that the seas come in sequence. Some bars might have 3 seas of a sequence, some's got 5 seas of a sequence.
Well, what's Swansea then?
5 seas.
5 seas.
Yes, 5 seas at Swansea.
Does that mean you come in on the 5th one, or do you wait for the 5th
Well,
one?
depends on how fast a boat you've got, but I speak of the slow boats, which is in the vicinity of 6 and 8 knots. You wait for 4 seas to go, then you start, and it's not long before the 5th one's past you, and then you come in and you'll get a good ride in and you'll have no trouble at all. That's it, you know, if things are reasonable at all.
No trouble at all, you say, but how did you... I've heard of Red Adair, you know, putting out oil fires all over the world, but how do we get Charlie Hollis to the rescue? And wait there, I can't really ask you that, I don't think, till you Someone said that's your famous rescue hat. Without that, you can't even answer the question, let alone be a formal rescue.
Well,
Come on, Charlie, let's have a look how you look on the lake.
This,
That's the lad.
well, as a matter of fact,
How did you get that thing?
as a matter of fact, I've got 3 of these, and at present, there's a fella's just bought another 12 for me. But although I've got new hats and that type of thing, as you'll all see, I won't part with this one. On our trip away north this year, the daughter put a foot on it, and she really made a mess of it, and everybody said, well, that's the end of the hat. But as you can see, the hat was repaired. I've still got it. I can still wear it.
I don't know how you tell whether she made a mess of it or not. Charlie, but what about the rescue, though? How did you get to this situation? Now, we're talking about the 1955 Maitland floods. You were part of that, integral part of the 74 cyclone on the lake, and of course many other rescues not attributable to some event such as that. But how do they get in contact with you? And are you always there, or are you sent for? Or where's the story of Charlie Hollis?
Sometimes it's a funny thing that sometimes I'm not very far away. Other times we get a phone call. We get phone calls all around the lake. You know, there's a boat in trouble or this type of thing, and we never hesitate to, well, doesn't matter what happens, we man the boat and away we go. And I can go back years ago when we had a heavy blow at Lake Macquarie Yacht Club, and there was no one to assist me, and the daughter had just come home from the pictures or something like that, high-heeled shoes, stockings and everything else, and she manned the boat and went with us. But we were there.
Yeah.
I maintain that we're always on the job in Belmont Bay within 20 minutes of a problem and that. But
I said at the start of the program, Charlie, that really all this we owe to you, because you actually said, nowhere in the world am I leaving Lake Macquarie. Yeah. Now, as I understand it, you said that to the CSIRO because you were in Lake Macquarie at the time, studying fish and oysters, is that right?
I resigned from CSIRO. Matter of fact, I was 13 years with them, forfeit long service leave and that. I could have went to Cronulla and then probably may have went to Tasmania or Western Australia. But Lake Macquarie, to me, I think is one of the best waterways. Well, I've been told it's the best waterway in the world, but right along the east coast of Australia, that's the best waterway there is.
And what was your work with the CSIRO, Charlie, prior to leaving?
Tagging fish and studying the depletion of fish in Lake Macquarie, plus studying the water temperatures and sampling of water and etc.
And prior to that, it was oysters. You came from an oyster family, really.
I came from an oyster family. We were probably one of the fourth or fifth biggest oyster farmers in Port Stephens, and we went. Then I went to Georges River. I was the first one to take stick cultivation to Georges River. And the dad, he was the first to start the tarred timber cultivation that is used right along the coast now, after they couldn't buy mangrove sticks.
Well, Charlie, you've done so much on behalf of others, not only on waterways, but as a community-spirited citizen. And you seem so bashful and so shy about it. It's almost embarrassing to be asking you these questions. But there's something we found from an old copy of the Newcastle Morning Herald, without embarrassing you too much, that I'd like to read, because I think this probably does more than anything else to sum up the spirit of Charlie Hollis. He's a life member of the Coastal Patrol. He's a life member of the Lake Macquarie Yacht Club. And here's someone who's just writing in the Newcastle Herald, the date I just can't place. By the time I had a very sick baby daughter who needed urgent medical treatment, a raging storm was blowing. Wind and rain took our breath away. In the darkness, it felt like the end of the world. I got in touch with the boat owner who operated a service in the island and asked, could you come in and take us to the mainland? The game man at most time, his reply was, no, not in this weather. But Charlie Hollis didn't say no. My baby and I were safely placed on his boat and eventually arrived at Cleveland, where an ambulance was waiting to rush my little lass to hospital. Charlie, that's the sort of thing which makes me say thank you very much, and I'm proud that you're one of the Valley's people. second guest today is a Hunter Valley playwright, John O'Donoghue. Now, John wrote a play earlier on about Essington Lewis, the general manager for so many years of the BHP in Newcastle. That's not the first play that John has written, but it's a very important play in the life of the Hunter Valley, and I should guess very important play in the life of Australian theatre. And I'm very pleased that John O'Donoghue is with us today. I might say, John, right at the start, that's something of a confession, because it's absolutely no way in the world I can handle one of those artistic interviews like, do you mirror yourself on the personalities of you write or something. The only reason why I'm enjoying talking to you today is the fact that everyone's told me that your ambition is purely to write damn good plays and to stop mucking about.
That's right, I think that'd be right, yes.
So that means we can at least conduct an interview about the subject matter without worrying about all the other abstracts.
All right, no, that's all right.
And John, I'm thrilled to do that because I Am Work really is the story of Newcastle in a way, isn't it?
I think it would be. It's the location of the BHP. It's the birthplace of the industrial age in Australia. You can almost put it to the day. Official opening of the steelworks on June the 2nd, 1915. So, yes, it's about Newcastle, really.
Now, you came from a father who, in that time zone, was virtually out of work. So you had a parental
Well, part
problem.
of the play is concerned with the troubles of the BHP in 1922, and especially the troubles of the Depression. Now, my father was, for most of his life, a labourer at the BHP. Well, he was a painter and a rigger, mainly a rigger. And he was out of work for all of the Depression, from very early in the Depression right till 1934-35.
Now, what's this confusing part of your early life about either joining the priesthood or being a teacher?
Oh, well, when I was young, I came from an Irish Catholic family, and I went away and studied in a seminary when I was When I was 12 years of age. I think this has got some bearing on the play that Lewis, for instance, at 12 years of age, is sent into the desert by his father into 100 miles west of Dalhousie Springs. And there is a religious thing there with Lewis and the Bible and the mad prophet and things like that. It's a scene I rather like writing.
Yeah, well, you can relive that to a degree,
Yeah,
I guess.
certainly, yes.
There's something else you must be able to relive, and the fact that you were born in Mayfield, so you were virtually could gaze at the BHP in your early life.
I was born on Elizabeth Street, Mayfield, in, was it called a maternity hospital in those days. There used to be a lot of them around Mayfield, kind of houses, large houses. It's now turned into a geriatric centre for old people. I might end my days there, where I began.
The Irish parents that you had, John, and they were victims of the Depression, did they recover from the Depression to an extent? I'm wondering why, wanting to be a teacher, then did you have to go to work at the BHP to pay for those studies?
Well, the Depression really ends, I think, about 1935. There was a fair bit of work around Newcastle, although they maintain that the war is the end of the Depression, where there's plenty of work when the war comes.
Right.
One of the things you find about the industrial ethos in Newcastle is the fact that there's only one generation goes into the steelworks. The next generation, there's a lot of upward social mobility. And that, well, I had a relative who maintained he'd rather go on the dole, this is just lately, that rather than, he said, my father worked there, he said, I'm not going to work there.
Right.
So you find a lot of people, it's just one generation. You don't find that in other areas of the world. In England, there's a play in England about a steelworks called Fight for Shelton Bar, where you get sons, fathers, grandfathers, great-grandfathers, and going back, had all worked in the steelworks, but you don't get this in Newcastle.
So you became fascinated by the steelworks in Essington Lewis, and you cover his life right through to, 1961, was it?
Now, until his death, yes.
Yes. And also you appear to be fascinated by his father, John Lewis.
Well, yes. Well, that's really what got me interested in the play. All drama is about conflict, and it's about basic Oedipal conflict. It's the father, sons, and so forth, and things like this. And in this case, in I Am Work, you had a classic case of Lewis's father, the great horseman, the legend in the Northern Territory, a real patriarchal figure, almost an old biblical type. I was fascinated by the father. And also you get this strange ambivalence in relation to the BHP is like a father figure. Right. You love and hate and things like this. So it was a classic case of the father's relationship.
And where did this research of yours take you, John?
Well, in
Surely
the
you
early
would-
days I was interested in just about the BHP. I mainly read Trengrove's book, What's Good for Australia, which is the story of BHP. And I was interested in some of the early figures like the Dutchman Willem Delpret, who was the general manager, and Lewis was his protege. Also David Baker, the American who really built the steelworks. But then I read Geoffrey Blaney's Bicentenary Award biography of Lewis called The Steelmaster, Essington Lewis, and that's what I mainly based it on. I found that very interesting.
But you're so strong on characters, and obviously that's what fascinates you most, the people.
Oh, yes. Well, the funny thing, people say to me when I was writing the play, what are you writing the play about? And I said, I'm writing one about the Steelworks, the BHP, and they say, oh, yeah, that's how lovely, you know. And, but when I started to research it, I came up with some, what I call dramatic bonuses for a playwright. For instance, Willem Delpret, the Dutchman, was a gift. I was quite tickled pink to find that the BHP board is mainly made up of Scotchmen, but the fellow who ran the BHP, the chairman of directors, was a kind of a wild Irishman, a real wild colonial boy named Bose Kelly. And that idea of Kelly, somebody named Kelly running the BHP, and then we get that connection with Ned Kelly. Like the first time Bose Kelly comes on stage, he's wearing the Ned Kelly headpiece. I found he was an interesting character. And then Hugo Mucke, the German, well, he wasn't German, he was German descent, and he actually, during the war, was thrown off the board, and not only thrown off the board, but interned also. So those very interesting characters, and Baker, and things like this, so it's just quite
Did you find you were treading new ground at any stage? Was your research, the anecdotes that you were receiving, were they
well,
confirming
a lot of people
characters?
don't read, you know, we don't, whatever history we don't do the history of the BHP. I found a lot of it very interesting to me, and I think a lot of people have found it quite interesting too. And there are certain things that are historically accurate insofar as the dialogue is word for word what was said. Like, for instance, Willem Delpret's speech at the official opening, where he's talking about the sons of the Southern Cross and is this our fair country and so forth, is word for word as he actually gave the speech on June the 2nd, 1915. There's quite a few other things too in the play that are in the boxing match. In that industrial ward, the BHP argued that they couldn't pay more wages because they were the poor shareholders. And Kerr Lewis, Justice Kerr Lewis, said, if you don't mind, you can spare us that little touch of pathos. It was quite sarcastic to them. Well, that comes in the play too. And another thing is when Lewis was left school, his father said, what do you want to do? And he said, I'd like to go into law. And his father said, law, don't be silly, you need brains to be a lawyer, or else a lot of money. You haven't got the first, and I'm damned if I'll give you the second.
Ends up being chairman.
And that's exactly what his father did say to him. They're the exact words, you don't have to make them up.
Yeah. The research took you, basically, were you provided with boardroom minutes? I couldn't imagine.
No, I didn't require those. I found that I started reading BHP reviews and things like that, and I found Blaney had been there before me.
Right.
There's little stories of, like Lewis, for instance, inventing the shadow board, and then the worker who put in the, drew in the magnifying glass so as he could see his wages. And all these, there's a whole lot of stories about Lewis, and he'd more or less done the work for me. There was one book that I did read, was Delpret had 5 daughters, of one of which married Sir Douglas Mawson, the Antarctic explorer. Lady Paquita Mawson, she wrote a book on her father called Vision of Steel. And that's very hard to get hold of, really, and that was quite interesting too. So I read that.
And you went to Broken Hill as a teacher too?
I was in Broken Hill in the early 50s and became rather enamoured of the place and the early days. A strange thing, I grew up often wondering why was the BHP the Broken Hill proprietary, and it was in Newcastle. What connection had it with Broken Hill? And that showed me the connection, how they found the mine there in 1885, and Charles Rasp and all those early days. And I realised that then the break was made about 1939. They moved out of Broken Hill. Once they moved out of Broken Hill, they were diversifying, and they went into steel. And from steel, they've diversified now, and it's huge now.
Yeah.
Into
You-
oil and so forth.
You're talking about discoveries and some old things. As I saw the play, there was something that stuck in my mind, and of course I'm going back in my lifestyle now. It's not very long ago that I would think that if you seriously suggested in Newcastle that you were going to go to the theatre, organised and conducted in Newcastle, to see a play about Newcastle or the BHP, written by a local, and virtually featuring Essington Lewis as a great man and leader of men, that you probably would have been burnt at the stake some 30 years ago, because it was a ludicrous idea. That just shows you a little bit, I think, how the Hunter Valley has developed in that short time.
Well, this is one of the things about what regional theatre is about, and it is trying to develop a certain consciousness, an artistic consciousness about the area. This is a very interesting area. Oh my! Now I'm just about to try my hand at another play dealing with the early days up around Major Moody at Castle Forbes, the hanging of the convicts up there, Molly Morgan, Martin Cash. There's a whole, Francis Groom, there's a whole lot of interesting material to be tapped in this area, which we don't. I think one of the reasons is being a teacher and also a lecturer, and I go around classrooms a lot. You know, poor old history's taught the same old way all the time. It's pretty dull.
Yeah. Well, it's great and
You know,
exciting, and it's equally great and exciting that you're covering it, John.
So you got a fellow like Helena Scott, who was up there. Scott Street's named after him. One of the toll puddle martyrs was sent to him. We gave him a terrible time, you know.
That's fantastic.
It's really, really interesting, yes.
Okay, John, well, thank you very much, and
Thanks very much.
our congratulations
Good.
on a play about I Am Work,
Thank you.
Essington Lewis.
Good.
Be back in a moment in The Valley's People. And our two guests today have been that great character from Lake Macquarie, Charlie Hollis, and also Newcastle playwright John O'Donoghue, who's written about another great character in Australia's life, Essington Lewis. I hope you can join us again in the next program of The Valley's People. And for now, goodbye.